I am the boss. How to set up and play. First thing you'll do is lay out the game board. You'll create the bank with all the money cards. You'll put out all 15 deal cards. These are put in order from 1 through 15. You have the investment placards that will pass out soon. These are all of the influence cards. This is the current deal marker and a die. The investment placards, there's 6 of them, lettered from A through F. You're going to randomly distribute these to all the players. Any leftovers are going to stay here on the game board. So since I'm setting this up for a 5-player game, each of the 5 players got 1 investment placard and 1 was left on the board. If this was a 3-player game, each player would get 2 investment placards with none left over. And if this was a 4-player game, each player would get 1 and you'd have 2 left over. Each player is randomly, you're going to shuffle this deck and give each player 5 starting influence cards. The hand limit for these is 12, so if a player is ever drawing more and they exceed the 12 card limit, they're going to have to discard down to 12. Finally, you're going to randomly determine a start player and give them the die. So let's randomly determine that this player will be the start player, and the player to their right can place the deal marker. They can place it anywhere on the board. So let's say they decide to place it right here to start the game. On the active player's turn, they've got a couple different options. The first decision they need to make is whether they'd like to try to initiate the deal where the current marker is on. Now, players are not allowed to say anything to the active player until he or she says, let's make a deal. So while the player is considering it, they're not allowed to offer deals, they're not allowed to play cards, they're not allowed to hint at anything they'd like to do. This is the active player on their own making the decision. If they decide not to initiate the deal where the current deal marker is, they're going to roll the dice and move the deal marker equal to the pips. So let's say they roll the dice and they get a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is where the active player has to make the decision whether to initiate this deal, or they have the option now to draw 3 cards from the top of the influence deck. If this was later in the game, you may have some of these deal markers, meaning that this deal had been closed and this deal had been closed. So in our example, if they rolled a 4, these would simply just get ignored. So they'd go 1, skipping this, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's where they would end up with a roll of 4 if closed deals were already on the board. But let's go back to our original example. No closed deals. The marker started here. They decided not to initiate this deal. Instead, they rolled the dice, went 4 spaces, and now they make the decision whether to try to initiate this deal or draw 3 cards from the top of the deck. Again, players are not allowed to say anything to them. They're not allowed to play any cards until they make their decision. If they decide to take 3 cards off the top of the deck, that ends their turn, and then start player would rotate clockwise to the next player. If they are drawing cards, again, there's a 12 card limit, so they can draw above the limit, and then they would have to discard cards down to 12. Instead of drawing cards, after the die roll, let's say this player has decided to try to initiate this deal. At that point, they announce to the table, let's make a deal. At that point, all players can now start the negotiation process, cards are allowed to be played, and so forth. So let's take a look at how a deal is structured and could potentially get closed. First, you determine the value of the deal. So you count the dollar signs up top. So we have 6 dollar signs multiplied by the current value of each dollar sign. So in round 1, each dollar sign is worth 2 million. So this deal would be worth $12 million. If we were later in the game and this deal hadn't been resolved, this same deal, if we were in round 10, you could see each dollar sign is worth 5. So this deal could be worth $30 million. The benefit of being the active player means you're the current boss. So you're the one trying to broker this deal, because if this deal gets closed, you're the recipient of all this cash. So if you could close it on your own, meaning that you could represent all the interested parties that need to agree, you could collect all the money on your own. Unfortunately, all the deals will require participation from other players, so you may have to pledge portions of this money, of the dividends, to other players to help them get you closed, get their help to close the deal. This indicates how many different clans or families are required to close the deal. So here, this requires 5 different families to close the deal. You need a representative from the E family, the D family, and then you need 3 more, and they could be either A, B, C, or F. 3 of these to close the deal. Let's compare that to this deal where you need 3 different representatives, and they have to be 1 from the C, 1 from the F, and 1 from the B. Here requires 4, but they could be any of these 4. And then here's one other example, again requires 4. You need 2 of these 3 and 2 of these 3. So sometimes they're going to be mandatory, like these, and sometimes you've got some flexibility of which families you can get agreement from. So the current boss is fortunate. They control one of the placards, so they know they can get the support of the F family, but now they need to at least get the support from the D family. That's a requirement. They need the support from the E family. Unfortunately, that placard's up here. So now this is the negotiation process where they're trying to get support from the other families to get this deal closed. So let's go through all the different types of permutations and how the influence cards can get played to close a deal. So let's say the first thing that this player does, remember this is all can be out of order. Once the deal has started, this player has decided to use 3 of their cards, play them. Whenever you play these types of cards, they have to be played in a set of 3. 1 or 2 cards by themselves have no value, but played as a set allows you to take one of these investment placards. If there is one still on the board, you have to take that one. So this player would have to take that one since it was still available. If there were no leftovers on the board, by playing 3 cards, this player can take an investment placard from any player and permanently add it to their own. The cards played are simply added to a discard pile. But by doing that, this player has now said to the boss, hey look, I can now represent this E family. I can help you close this deal. I can represent A and E, which are 2 of the families you need to close the deal. But then this player may also say, you know what, I can also temporarily represent the E family. So these are cards that you can play that for the current deal allow you to represent the family. So now both these players can represent the E family to help get this deal closed, giving this player more options in terms of who they want to work with. That play may cause this player to say, you know what, I'm going to play this, means that your representative is currently traveling on vacation, so they're not even eligible to represent the family in this deal. That might cause another player to play one of their cards and say, you know what, I agree, this player had too much power, I'm going to prevent them from representing that family. They're also on vacation. These gray cards are wild cards. They can be played against any family clan versus the ones that match the color. If one of these is played against a temporary card representative, you could simply discard these or discard them at the end of the deal. But basically, this play has nullified the representative power of that card. So now the current boss might be saying, shoot, I need D to make this deal, and they can't even represent the family. So tell you what, I'm going to play one of my cards, and I'm now going to represent the D family. So I can represent F and D in this deal that I'm trying to broker as the boss. So the current boss can offer any amount of money to other players to help them to get to close the deal. Normally it's a portion of the dividends. So again, we know this deal is worth 12 million. So maybe this player says, you know what, I'll give any player that gets in on this 1 million each, and I'll take the remainder. And players may negotiate back and forth, negotiate different things to get higher shares of the dividend, Once he or she thinks a deal has been reached, they announce the terms of the deal. This is how it's going to work. And then they say going once, going twice, finalized. That's giving other players a chance to play any final cards. So let's say right before the deal was finalized, going once, going twice, this player says, no, wait, stop, I'm now the boss. So the active player that was the boss has now changed, and now this player is responsible for brokering the deal and eligible to get all the money and divvy it up towards the shares. And this player says, no, that's ridiculous. I'm going to play one of my cards from my hand. I'm the boss again. And this player may respond with the final type of card that you'll see in the influence deck, the stop card. The stop card can be used to prevent someone from playing the boss. That's the money symbol. It can also be used to prevent someone from playing one of their travel cards. That's the airplane symbol. And then finally, it can be used to prevent someone from playing a set of 3 to steal a placard. The only thing it can't prevent is someone putting out a temporary representative to represent a family. But it can stop a boss, it can stop a travel, and it can stop stealing a placard. The one thing you can't do is you cannot stop a stop card. So this player basically played this when this player was trying to become the boss. It cancels that card, and they stay as the current boss of the round. If the current boss is not able to reach a deal, let's say an impasse is reached, the turn simply ends with no deal being made. But let's say this boss can make a deal. Let's say they still negotiate with the original boss. They say, you know what, I need both your people. I'll give you 5 of the 12 million, and I need your A and your E. I'll give you another 4 of the 12 million, and then I'll represent the final B, and that'll close the deal. Going once, going twice, sold, and that locks the deal. At that point, the current boss would collect all the money. They'd get 12 million money from the bank, and they've got to pay out their obligations. The obligations are bounding. You can never go back on what you've promised to pay. So give the players their payments. These are victory points at the end of the game. Money can stay hidden, so you can keep it stacked and only show other players what you have stacked on top. So the players that close the deal would take them. The final step you do is you take the deal placard. You mark this as a closed deal, meaning this deal can never be made again for the remainder of the game. The current deal marker just slides clockwise once. All influence cards that were used in the round simply just go to the discard pile. Obviously, you keep your permanent placards, but all the cards get discarded. The only exception is this player, let's say this player played the B card. This didn't get used because the current boss used their own B representative. So since this card didn't get a chance to get used, that can just come back to this player's hand. All other temporary cards are discarded. The start player now rotates 1 clockwise from whoever was the final boss of the round. So this player didn't start as the boss, but they finished as the boss, so the start player would rotate from here, meaning some players could get skipped throughout the round. There is an official variant that regardless of who ended up as the boss, whoever was the original active player, the start player rotates from there clockwise. Play will continue in the same manner as different deals get closed throughout the game, starting with the 10th deal and after. Once that deal gets closed, the game has the potential to end. So once the 10th deal gets closed, a separate die roll will be made, and if it's a 1, the game will end. At the end of the 11th round, a 1 or a 2 die roll will end the game. And so this keeps going up. And then finally, at the end of the 15th deal, if the die rolls did not prematurely end the game is officially over. Whenever the game ends, all players simply count up their accumulated money throughout the game. Most money wins the game. And that's everything you need to set up and play I'm the Boss.